Have you ever noticed certain women who seem to defy time itself? Not through cosmetic procedures or expensive skincare routines, but through something far more mysterious and profound. They carry a lightness, a radiance that has nothing to do with their actual age on paper. Carl Jung, the legendary depth psychologist, discovered that these women possess a specific spiritual quality that literally transforms how they age, how they appear, and how they move through the world. This isn't about genetics or luck. It's about a psychological and spiritual state that Jung identified as one of the most powerful indicators of a woman's relationship with her unconscious, her authentic self, and the life force itself. What Jung found will challenge everything you think you know about aging, beauty, and what it truly means to be a woman who's connected to something deeper than the material world. Today, we're going to explore Jung's revolutionary insights into why some women seem to age backwards, not forwards. Why their eyes hold a particular sparkle that you can't find in younger women still trapped in unconscious living. Why their presence feels different, lighter, more alive than women decades younger, who are weighed down by psychological burdens they haven't yet confronted. But before we dive into Jung's profound discoveries, if you're a woman who senses there's something deeper happening beneath the surface of aging and appearance, subscribe to Dreams and Depths and hit that notification bell. Because what we're exploring here goes beyond anti-aging tips into the actual psychology and spirituality of women who've accessed something most people never find. Your inner wise woman knows you need this understanding. Jung spent decades studying what he called the puer aeternus and puella eterna archetypes, the eternal youth patterns that live in the collective unconscious. But he discovered something fascinating that most people misunderstand. There are two completely different types of youthfulness in women. The first type is psychological immaturity disguised as youth. Women who look young because they've never grown up, never individuated, never faced their shadow, or taken responsibility for their psychological development. These women often appear youthful in their 20s and 30s, but there's something hollow about it, an emptiness behind the eyes, a quality of being unformed, uncooked, not yet real. They're living in what Jung called participation mystique, merged unconsciously with collective expectations, never having separated into authentic selfhood. This kind of youth doesn't last. By their 40s and 50s, these women often look older than their years because the lack of psychological substance eventually shows in the face, the body, the energy field. But then there's the second type. And this is what Jung found truly remarkable. These are women who've done the psychological work, who've descended into their depths, integrated their shadow, individuated into authentic selfhood. And paradoxically, mysteriously, these women often begin looking younger as they age, not in a Peter Pan way, but in a way that suggests they've accessed the eternal spring that lives beneath psychological time. Jung discovered that this mysterious youthfulness comes from what he called psychological fluidity, the ability to remain open, curious, and connected to the life force without rigidifying into fixed patterns of identity and belief. When a woman does the deep work of individuation, when she integrates her shadow and retrieves the rejected parts of herself, something extraordinary happens to her relationship with time itself. She stops aging in the conventional sense because she's no longer carrying the weight of unlived life. Think about what happens to most people as they age. They accumulate resentments, regrets, suppressed emotions, and unlived dreams. Each suppressed desire, each unexpressed truth, each rejected part of the self becomes a psychological burden that literally weighs down the energy body. This weight shows in the face and the posture, in what Jung called the phenomenology of aging. But the woman who has done her inner work, who has faced her darkness and integrated it, who has retrieved her power from all the places she gave it away, this woman carries no such weight. She's metabolized her experiences, transformed her suffering into wisdom, and integrated her shadow into conscious awareness. The result is a lightness of being that defies chronological age. Jung observed this phenomenon repeatedly in his clinical practice. He noticed that women who underwent successful analysis, who truly individuated and became psychologically whole, often experienced a kind of reverse aging. Their skin would become more radiant, their eyes brighter, their movements more fluid. Colleagues would comment that they looked years younger, but it wasn't about looking young in a superficial sense. It was about embodying aliveness itself. What's the psychological mechanism behind this? Jung identified it as the restoration of what he called libido, not sexual energy in the narrow Freudian sense, but life force itself, the creative psychic energy that animates consciousness. When this energy is blocked by unconscious complexes, suppressed emotions, and psychological rigidity, it can't flow freely through the system. The person ages rapidly because they're essentially dying slowly from the inside out. But when psychological work frees this energy, when shadow integration releases the power trapped in the unconscious, when individuation allows authentic self-expression, the libido flows again. And where psychic energy flows, life flows. Youth, in its truest sense, is not about the absence of years, but about the presence of aliveness. Jung understood that women who maintain connection to their inner depths, to their dreams, to their creative unconscious, tap into a source of renewal that operates outside linear time. There's also something Jung called the anima's influence at work here. For women who've integrated their animus, their inner masculine energy, in healthy ways, there's a particular quality of psychological androgyny that emerges, not in terms of gender expression, but in terms of psychological completeness. These women have access to both masculine and feminine energies within themselves, creating a dynamic balance that prevents the kind of one-sided development that accelerates aging. The spiritual quality Jung identified in women who look younger has everything to do with their relationship to what he called the self, that transcendent center of the psyche that exists beyond ego identification. Most people live their entire lives identified exclusively with their ego, their personality, their roles, their self-image. As this ego-based identity encounters the inevitable losses, disappointments, and limitations of life, it becomes increasingly rigid, defended, and closed off. This rigidification is what we see as aging. It's not just the physical body breaking down, it's the psychological structure hardening in response to life's challenges. The face becomes set in habitual expressions of disappointment, bitterness, or resignation. The body carries the tension of decades of emotional suppression. The eyes lose their light because the inner light has been dimmed by layers of psychological defense. But the woman who has connected to the self, who has experienced what Jung called the objective psyche, the vast intelligence that operates beyond personal ego, carries a different quality entirely. She knows herself as more than her personality, more than her life circumstances, more than her accumulated experiences. She has touched something eternal within herself, and that eternal quality radiates through her physical form. Jung wrote extensively about what he called the wisdom of the self, the intelligence that guides the individuation process from deep within the unconscious. Women who learn to listen to this inner wisdom, who trust the symbolic language of dreams, who pay attention to synchronicities and allow themselves to be guided by something larger than ego, will develop a particular quality of surrender that paradoxically makes them more powerful and more youthful. This surrender isn't passivity or weakness. It's the release of the exhausting effort to control life, to force outcomes, to maintain the persona at all costs. When a woman stops fighting reality and starts flowing with it, when she releases the need to prove herself and simply allows herself to be, something in her physiology actually changes. The stress hormones that accelerate aging decrease. The parasympathetic nervous system that supports rest and renewal becomes more active. The entire organism relaxes into a state of grace. Jung observed that women who had experienced what he called a religious attitude toward life, not necessarily formal religion, but a sense of connection to something sacred and meaningful, maintained their vitality far longer than women who lived purely materialistic or ego-driven lives. This religious attitude involved recognizing the numinous in everyday existence, honoring the mystery of life, and maintaining reverence for forces larger than personal will. There's also the factor of what Jung called psychological virginity. Not literal virginity, but an inner quality of renewal and freshness that comes from not being psychologically penetrated and possessed by collective values, other people's projections, or the demands of consensus reality. These women have maintained an inner sanctuary that remains untouched, unpolluted, eternally virgin in the sense of belonging to themselves alone. This psychological virginity allows them to encounter each moment fresh, without the weight of accumulated conditioning. They can be spontaneous because they're not burdened by rigid scripts about how a woman of their age should behave. They can be playful because they haven't internalized the collective's demand that older women be serious, responsible, and invisible. They can be curious because they've maintained connection to the eternal child archetype within, not as regression, but as access to wonder. Jung also understood that women who look younger possess what he called access to the creative unconscious. They haven't severed the connection to the wellspring of imagination, dreams, and symbolic life that most people lose as they age. Creative energy and youthful energy are essentially the same thing. When a woman maintains her creative connection, whether through art, writing, music, or simply a creative approach to living, she's drawing from the same source that generates new life. This creative connection keeps the psyche fluid rather than fixed. It prevents the kind of psychological fossilization that happens when people stop growing, stop learning, stop being surprised by life. Jung observed that women who continued to develop creatively throughout their lives, who remained students of their own depths, who stayed curious about the mysteries of consciousness, these women aged differently. They aged into wisdom rather than into bitterness, into depth rather than into cynicism. There's also what Jung called the Eros principle at work in these women. Eros in Jungian psychology isn't just romantic or sexual love. It's the principle of relatedness, connection, and relationship to all of life. Women who maintain strong Eros function stay connected to beauty, to nature, to other people, to the web of life itself. This connection is literally rejuvenating because isolation and disconnection are primary factors in accelerated aging. When a woman feels related to the world, when she experiences genuine connection and exchange of energy with life around her, she's participating in a continuous circuit of renewal. But when she withdraws into isolation, when she closes her heart to protect it from further pain, when she severs the threads of connection, she begins dying psychologically, and that death shows physically. The women Jung identified as maintaining youthful appearance were almost always women who had preserved or restored their capacity for deep relationship and genuine encounter with life. If you're recognizing yourself in these descriptions, if you sense that you're one of these women who's accessing something deeper than surface aging, subscribe to Dreams and Depths. We're dedicated to exploring the real psychology and spirituality of women who found the eternal spring within themselves. This isn't about anti-aging tricks. It's about the transformation that makes age irrelevant. Another crucial element Jung identified is what he termed the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites in tension without collapsing into one side or the other. Women who look younger have typically developed this capacity to an extraordinary degree. They can be both strong and soft, both independent and connected, both serious and playful, both wise and innocent. This psychological flexibility prevents the kind of one-sided development that creates rigidity. Most people, as they age, become increasingly identified with one pole of existence. They become either bitter or overly sweet, either hardened or pathetically soft, either rigidly controlled or completely chaotic. But the individuated woman holds the tension of opposites within herself, creating a dynamic balance that keeps her psychologically alive and therefore physically vital. Jung also spoke of symbolic living versus literal living, and this distinction is crucial for understanding youthful vitality. Women who live purely literally, who see life only in terms of concrete facts and material reality, age rapidly because they're cut off from the renewing power of symbol and meaning. But women who live symbolically, who see the deeper patterns beneath surface events, who recognize the archetypal dimensions of their experiences, these women access a timeless dimension that literally affects their relationship with time itself. In the end, what Carl Jung revealed wasn't a secret beauty formula or a mystical shortcut to eternal youth. It was something far more profound and empowering. Youthfulness, in its deepest sense, is not something painted on the surface of the skin. It's something that radiates outward from a psyche that is alive, fluid, and intimately connected to the self. These women who seem to transcend time are not simply lucky, they are awake. They've dared to descend into their own darkness, to reclaim their projections, to walk through the fire of shadow work and emerge with a light that no wrinkle can conceal. Their radiance is not cosmetic, it is existential. This is why their presence can be felt long before their age can be guessed. They carry a timeless signature in their energy field, the unmistakable quality of someone who has chosen evolution over stagnation, who has chosen meaning over numbness. The eternal spring Jung spoke of isn't somewhere out there. It lives at the center of the psyche, beneath layers of fear, conformity, and woundedness. When a woman reconnects to that source, the years no longer diminish her, they refine her. Like river stones smoothed over time, her essence becomes more luminous, not less. We live in a culture obsessed with fighting age, but Jung's insight was revolutionary because it showed us that true vitality doesn't come from resistance, it comes from integration. To stay young is not to cling to the past, but to continually open to the present. It is to let life move through you, not to brace against it. It is to allow grief, joy, desire, and mystery to circulate freely without damming the river with egoic defenses. This is the spiritual quality Jung observed in certain women. Not superficial youth, but eternal presence. They are living symbols of the self, rooted yet fluid, wise yet playful, soft yet powerful. And the truth is, this quality isn't reserved for a chosen few. It is available to every woman who chooses the path of inner work, who returns to her depths, and who learns to live in relationship with the sacred within. Because in the end, the real secret to agelessness is not trying to look young. It's remembering you were never separate from the timeless to begin with.